The Manhattan skyline glittered like 1,000 diamonds against the glass walls of the Hayes penthouse. It was Thanksgiving Day, and everything seemed perfect, at least on the surface. The dining table stretched long under a crystal chandelier, polished silverware gleaming beside plates of roasted turkey, cranberry sauce, and truffle mashed potatoes. Emily Carter Hayes, 7 months pregnant, moved carefully between the chairs, her hands resting on her belly as if shielding the tiny heartbeat inside. Her husband, Victor Hayes, 33, handsome, cold, the CEO of a billion-dollar fintech company, was glued to his MacBook Pro, answering emails even as the smell of baked pumpkin pie filled the air. "Could you at least look up for a minute?" Emily asked softly. Victor sighed, not looking away from the screen. "Just business, Em. One more email." Emily smiled faintly, though her chest tightened. The woman sitting across the table, Lila Monroe, placed a manicured hand on Victor's arm, her Cartier bracelet catching the light. "Don't be too hard on him, Emily," she said sweetly. "Men like Victor carry the world on their shoulders." The words slid like ice down Emily's spine. She forced a polite smile. Everyone in the room thought Lila was Victor's business partner. Only Emily felt the strange electricity between them, the kind that hums under secrets. In the corner, an elderly woman in a gray sweater quietly wiped the marble floor with a rag. Her hands were wrinkled, her movements slow but steady. She had been working in the house for just a few weeks. Her name, Emily remembered, was Maggie. "Careful there," Lila said, her tone sharp. "You missed a spot." Maggie bowed her head. "Sorry, ma'am." Emily turned toward the older woman. "It's fine, Maggie. Take your time. We're all family today." Lila rolled her eyes. "Family?" She whispered under her breath, loud enough for Emily to hear. "Since when do maids count as family?" Emily froze. Something about the cruelty in Lila's voice made her blood boil. "Everyone deserves respect," she said quietly. Lila stood up, high heels clicking against the marble. "Respect is earned, darling, not given." Victor glanced up briefly, sensing the tension, but doing nothing. Emily could almost see her reflection in his cold gray eyes, small, fragile, fading. The older woman accidentally knocked over a bucket of dirty water, spilling it near Lila's Dior heels. "Oh, for God's sake!" Lila screamed. She grabbed the bucket, her eyes burning with fury. "You clumsy old witch!" Before anyone could stop her, she tilted the bucket forward. A stream of brownish water poured over the woman's back, soaking her sweater, dripping onto the floor. "Maggie!" Emily gasped, rushing forward. She slipped slightly on the wet marble, one hand gripping her belly. Victor's chair screeched backward. "Lila, what the hell are you doing?" "She ruined my shoes," Lila snapped, her face twisted. "She should learn her place." Emily knelt beside the old woman, pulling a towel from the counter. Maggie's hands trembled, but her eyes, calm, dignified, met Emily's. "It's all right, dear," she whispered. But Emily couldn't breathe. The shame in the room was suffocating. "Enough," she shouted, turning toward Lila. "You don't get to treat people like that." For the first time, Victor looked truly shocked. His wife, quiet, gentle Emily, was trembling with rage. Lila's lips curled into a smirk. "Relax, sweetheart. It's just a maid." Emily's voice cracked, but she didn't back down. "Then maybe you should learn who you're pouring water on. Because the woman you just humiliated isn't a maid at all. She's Victor's mother. And tonight, everyone's gonna find out." The silence after the splash was deafening. Maggie stood motionless, water dripping from her hair onto the marble floor. Her gray sweater clung to her thin shoulders, and for a second, the glittering penthouse felt colder than the Manhattan wind outside. Lila Monroe stood frozen, the empty bucket still in her hand, her face caught between anger and sudden fear. Emily's breath came in short bursts. She dropped to her knees beside the old woman, her pregnancy making every movement heavy and painful. "Oh my God, Maggie, are you hurt?" she whispered, reaching for a towel. Maggie shook her head, her lips trembling. "It's fine, dear," she said softly, her voice fragile but composed. "It's just water." But Emily saw the humiliation in her eyes, the quiet heartbreak of someone proud to defend herself. "No," Emily murmured, wiping Maggie's arms. "It's not fine." Victor finally moved, stepping closer. "Lila, what the hell was that?" Lila scoffed, trying to regain her composure. "It was an accident. She spilled the bucket first. Look!" She pointed at the puddle, twisting the story instantly. "That's not true," Emily shouted, her voice shaking. "You did it on purpose." Lila's painted lips curved into a cruel smile. And you're calling me a liar, pregnant lady? Maybe you should calm down before you hurt yourself. Emily's chest burned. You think this is funny? That you can come into my home and humiliate people like this? Lila stepped forward, her perfume thick in the air, her voice dripping with venom. Sweetheart, maybe if you kept your husband entertained, he wouldn't invite me to dinner. The words hit like a slap. Victor's eyes widened. Lila. But the damage was done. Emily's heart twisted, the truth confirming every unspoken fear she had. Her husband's silence screamed louder than any confession. She struggled to stand, her legs weak. Daniel Brooks, the security chief, rushed in, drawn by the shouting. Mrs. Hayes, are you okay? He asked, his gaze shifting between the dripping floor and Lila's shaking hand. I'm fine, Emily managed, but her voice cracked. Fine? Maggie whispered, holding Emily's hand. No, sweetheart, you're not fine. Daniel grabbed a towel and handed it to Maggie. As he did, he noticed the small gold ring on her finger, old, engraved with the initials MH. Something flickered in his memory, but he said nothing. Lila crossed her arms, glaring. You all act like I murdered someone. It was just water. Daniel's tone hardened. Ma'am, I suggest you lower your voice. We have security cameras everywhere. Her face blanched. You're threatening me now? No, he said calmly. Just stating a fact. Emily helped Maggie into the kitchen, ignoring the luxury that surrounded them. The polished granite counters, the faint scent of Dior candles, the ridiculous contrast between wealth and cruelty. She wrapped Maggie in a soft blanket and handed her a cup of chamomile tea. Thank you, the older woman whispered. You didn't have to. I did, Emily replied quietly, because no one else would. Outside the kitchen door, Lila hissed to Victor. Are you seriously letting her make a scene? Your board members are still in the living room. This could ruin you. Victor rubbed his temples. Just stop talking. Oh, now you tell me to stop, she sneered. Maybe you should tell your wife to stop playing saint. Emily's hand tightened on the teacup. She wanted to scream, but the baby inside her kicked, a reminder to stay strong. Maggie reached over, her wrinkled hand warm against Emily's. You have courage, she said softly. Don't lose it. Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. Outside, the rain began tapping against the windows, Manhattan lights shimmering through the glass. Daniel's voice echoed faintly from the hallway, low and urgent. Jordan, get me the footage from the dining area. Emily looked up, realizing what he was doing, preserving proof. Her heart pounded. She turned toward Maggie, whose calm gaze seemed to hide something deeper. Who are you really? Emily whispered. Maggie smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. Someone who needed to know what kind of heart her son's wife has. Emily froze, not understanding. Maggie sipped her tea, her voice barely audible. And tonight, I found out. The storm outside wasn't the only one coming. Another was about to break inside this family. The next morning, sunlight crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the marble kitchen into a mirror of gold. The smell of coffee and guilt floated in the air. Emily sat at the Long Island counter, her hands wrapped around a mug she didn't drink. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the splash, heard the bucket hit the floor, and saw Lila's smirk. Victor walked in wearing a tailored navy suit, tie already perfect. He looked every inch the billionaire CEO again, calm, polished, untouchable. Emily wanted to believe the man she married was still inside him somewhere. We need to talk, she said quietly. Victor checked his Rolex, glancing at the clock instead of her. Make it quick. I've got a board call in 15. Emily took a breath. About last night. About what Lila did. He exhaled, rubbing his forehead. Emily, please, don't turn this into something bigger than it is. Bigger than it is? She repeated, her voice rising. She poured dirty water on an old woman, Victor, and you stood there. He finally looked at her. She said it was an accident. Emily's heart dropped. You believe her? He didn't answer. He reached for his briefcase instead, sliding his MacBook inside. Victor, she said, her voice trembling. Why was she even there? Why does your business partner have dinner with us, wear Cartier to my Thanksgiving table, and know where the guest bedroom is? His jaw tightened. Watch your tone. Oh, I'm sorry, she said, sarcasm spilling out like acid. Is it disrespectful to ask why my husband's lover was serving dessert in my home? He froze. That's not. Don't lie to me. Her words sliced through the air. Even the hum of the city outside seemed to stop. Victor stared at her for a long moment, then turned toward the door. I don't have time for this. Emily's voice cracked. You never do. He stopped, hand on the doorframe, but didn't turn around. You're tired, Em. Rest. You're overreacting. And then he was gone. Emily stood there shaking, tears spilling down her cheeks. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, pale, fragile, invisible. She whispered to herself, he didn't even say sorry. A soft knock broke the silence. Maggie stepped in, her sweater freshly washed, hair pulled back. You shouldn't get upset, dear, she said gently. I can't help it, Emily murmured. He doesn't see me anymore. Maggie smiled sadly. Men who forget where they came from always need a reminder. Emily looked at her, curious. You talk like you know him. I've seen many like him, Maggie said. But don't worry, the truth has a way of finding daylight. Olivia Bennett called right then, her voice bright through the speaker. Em, I saw something online. Lila posted a picture last night, her and Victor at the plaza. Caption says, business never sleeps. Emily's stomach twisted. She posted it after what happened? Yeah, she's baiting you, Olivia said. Don't take it, just breathe. I'm coming over. Emily hung up, clutching the phone. Maggie placed a warm hand on her shoulder. Courage, dear, you'll need it. Daniel, the security chief, appeared at the doorway, holding a small USB drive. Mrs. Hayes, he said quietly, I thought you should have this. The footage from last night, 3 different angles. Emily blinked. You kept it? Company policy, he said, but you might want to see what it really shows. He placed the drive on the counter, nodded to Maggie, and left. Emily stared at the tiny silver device, realizing it might contain everything. Proof of Lila's cruelty, Victor's silence, maybe even the first crack in their perfect empire. Maggie watched her closely, her expression unreadable. Be careful, Emily. The truth can save you or destroy you. Emily met her eyes, tears glimmering. Then I'll let it destroy the lies instead. Outside, a gust of wind slammed against the glass, scattering the city's light into fractured reflections. Just like her marriage, beautiful on the surface, breaking underneath. And somewhere in those reflections, the first spark of revenge was born. That evening, the Hayes penthouse came alive again, not with laughter, but with the forced politeness of high society. The Thanksgiving chaos had already been scrubbed away by the staff, leaving behind a sterile calm. The marble floors gleamed, the candles burned evenly, but the air was heavy, like it was waiting for something to explode. Lila Monroe arrived early for the reconciliation dinner Victor had arranged. She wore a cream Dior dress that shimmered under the chandelier and a diamond pendant that caught every flicker of light. She looked like she'd just walked off a magazine cover, confident, elegant, and cruel. When Emily appeared from the hallway wearing a simple navy maternity dress, Lila gave a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, darling, she said smoothly, you look exhausted. Pregnancy can really take the glow out of a woman, can't it? Emily ignored the jab. I'm fine, thank you. Victor stood between them, shifting uncomfortably. Let's just have a calm dinner, he said. We all overreacted last night. Emily turned her gaze to him. We? Lila placed her hand on Victor's arm. He's right. We shouldn't dwell on the past. Let's focus on peace. Daniel Brooks, the security chief, stood discreetly near the dining room archway, pretending to check his phone. In reality, he was reviewing footage on a private app, the one from last night. He saw it clearly again. Lila lifting the bucket, her lips moving. Let's teach this hag a lesson. The reflection of her smirk gleamed on the polished counter. Maggie entered quietly, wearing a fresh gray cardigan. She carried a tray of wine glasses, her movements steady, dignified. Lila's eyes darted toward her, and for a brief moment, her composure cracked. Oh, Lila said coolly. You're still here? Maggie nodded, placing the glasses on the table. Mr. Hayes asked me to stay until after dinner. How generous, Lila murmured, sipping her wine. Just don't spill anything this time. Emily's hands tightened on her napkin. She looked at Victor, waiting for him to defend the older woman. He didn't. Dinner began. The silver cutlery clinked softly. Small talk floated across the table like thin smoke, hollow, rehearsed. Lila leaned in closer to Victor every time she laughed, her perfume overwhelming. So, Lila said sweetly, I was thinking about the gala next week at the plaza. We could announce the new foundation initiative together. It would look wonderful for press. 2 strong business partners side by side. Emily blinked. Press? Lila smiled, all teeth. Oh, of course. Victor didn't tell you? The Hayes Foundation is sponsoring the event. Victor hesitated. I was going to. You were going to what? Emily cut in. Tell me when my husband's mistress becomes the face of our charity? The room froze. Lila's eyes widened, but she quickly recovered, laughing softly. You really should relax, Emily. Jealousy isn't a good look. Maggie's voice cut through the air, steady and sharp. Neither is cruelty. Lila turned to her, face twisting. Excuse me? The old woman met her gaze. You think class comes from money. It doesn't. It comes from kindness, something you clearly can't afford. Victor slammed his hand on the table. Enough. This is out of control. Emily stood. No, Victor. What's out of control is the fact that you keep protecting a woman who humiliated your own employee in your own home. Her words hit like thunder. Lila rolled her eyes, reaching for her iPhone. This is ridiculous. I'll call a car. Daniel stepped forward, calm but firm. Actually, Miss Monroe, before you leave, maybe you should see something. He placed a tablet on the table, pressing play. The video began. Lila's voice, her hand, the splash, the laughter, the proof. The room went silent except for the faint sound of dripping water echoing from the recording. Lila's face drained of color. You had no right. Maggie interrupted, her voice low but unshakable. You had no right to treat people like dirt. Emily folded her arms. You can't bury truth with designer heels, Lila. Lila turned toward Victor, desperate now. Say something. Victor looked between the two women, his wife, his mistress, and for the first time he didn't speak at all. And in that silence, the empire of lies began to crumble. The night after the confrontation, the Hayes penthouse felt haunted. The city outside was alive with traffic and light, but inside, silence spread like smoke. Victor had locked himself in his office. Lila was gone, storming out after Daniel showed her the video. Emily sat alone on the couch, the glow from the fireplace flickering against her pale face. She was exhausted, her hands resting on her belly as if protecting her baby from all the noise that hadn't even been spoken yet. The door creaked softly. Maggie stepped inside, holding a cup of warm milk. You need to rest, dear, she said. Emily looked up and smiled weakly. Rest isn't easy when the man you love doesn't even look you in the eye. Maggie walked closer, setting the cup down on the coffee table beside a silver-framed wedding photo. Victor's smile in the picture looked different now, forced, hollow. Men can lose themselves in ambition, Maggie said quietly, especially when they start believing they're untouchable. Emily sighed. I used to think he just worked too hard. Now I realize he's been gone for months. The older woman sat beside her, her posture straight despite her age. You did nothing wrong, child. You have a good heart, that's why it hurts. Emily's eyes filled. You defended me yesterday. You didn't have to. Maggie smiled faintly. Oh, I had to. You reminded me of someone I once knew, a young woman who thought love could fix everything. Emily frowned. What happened to her? Maggie looked toward the window, watching the Manhattan skyline shimmer. She married a man who became a stranger, but she never lost her dignity. For a moment, Emily wondered if Maggie was speaking about herself. Before she could ask, Victor's office door opened. His voice was sharp. Maggie, I told you to take the night off. Maggie stood slowly. And I told you, Mr. Hayes, that no man dismisses me when I'm not done speaking. Victor froze. He wasn't used to defiance, especially not from someone he thought was staff. Excuse me? Emily rose, heart pounding. Victor, don't talk to her like that. He looked between them, frustration spilling over. This house has turned into chaos because you can't control your emotions. Emily's voice trembled. Because you can't control your lies. The silence cut like glass. Maggie watched quietly, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke, her tone cool and deliberate. You may be powerful, Victor, but power means nothing if you've forgotten what kind of man your mother raised. Victor turned sharply, eyes narrowing. What did you just say? Maggie's lips curved, neither smiling nor frowning. You heard me. Emily's heart skipped. Something unspoken passed between them. A flicker of recognition, a ghost of truth. Maggie, Victor said, his voice low. Do you know my mother? Maggie looked at him for a long, steady moment. Then she said softly, Better than you do. Emily's breath caught. What are you saying? But Maggie didn't answer. She picked up her coat and said, Sometimes the ones you overlook are the ones holding your world together. She started toward the elevator, pausing just before stepping in. Be careful, Victor. The truth has a way of showing up, whether you're ready or not. The elevator doors closed behind her. Victor rubbed his temples. That woman's losing her mind. Emily stared at him. No, she whispered. I think she just found hers. He turned to leave, but Emily spoke again, voice trembling yet firm. If you think this is over, Victor, you're wrong. You don't get to erase what she said, or what you did. He didn't answer. The door shut hard behind him, leaving Emily alone with the crackling fire and her spiraling thoughts. She looked down at her belly, whispering, I promise you'll never grow up thinking silence is strength. Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall over Manhattan, melting as they touched the glowing glass. Somewhere in the dark, Maggie walked away from the building. Her secret safe for now, but not for long, because soon everyone would learn who she really was. The next morning, Park Avenue gleamed beneath a pale winter sun. The streets were slick from last night's snow, and the air held that sharp, metallic chill of early December. Inside the 32nd floor of Hayes Capitol, a meeting was already underway. Victor sat at the head of a long conference table made of polished walnut, surrounded by board members in tailored suits. His face was calm, almost too calm, like a mask that refused to crack. A silver Mont Blanc pen rested between his fingers, his weapon of choice in business and silence alike. Across from him, Lila Monroe looked flawless again. Not a trace of guilt left on her face. She wore a white Chanel blazer and a confident smile that dared anyone to question her. The previous night's shame seemed erased, like it had never happened. Emily entered the boardroom quietly, her soft steps echoing in the tension-filled air. She dressed simply but elegantly. Navy dress, pearl earrings, hair tied neatly, the picture of grace under fire. Maggie followed a few steps behind, holding a small folder in her hands. Victor frowned. Emily, this is a private meeting. She met his eyes without flinching. It's about your company. It's about your name. So I'd say it's my business too. A few board members exchanged uneasy glances. Emily's voice was calm, but there was something new in it, something strong. Lila tilted her head, pretending to smile. Oh, Emily, this isn't really your kind of room. We're discussing financial projections, not feelings. Emily looked at her, then at Victor. She's right. It's not about feelings. It's about integrity. Victor sighed. Emily, but she interrupted him. You think the incident last night won't touch this company? A video of your so-called partner humiliating an old woman in your home? That's not just personal, Victor. That's corporate suicide. The room went still. Even Lila's smile faltered. Daniel Brooks, standing by the glass wall, cleared his throat. She's right, sir. I have the footage backed up. It's only a matter of time before someone leaks it. Victor's hand tightened around his pen. You have the footage? Yes, Daniel said. And so does our legal team. Lila turned sharply. You can't show that. It's private property. Maggie stepped forward, her voice steady. You forfeited privacy when you treated another human being like trash. Lila glared at her. You again? Why are you even here? Maggie met her gaze. Because I still believe some people can change. Even you. Lila scoffed, laughing under her breath. You're delusional, old woman. Emily's hand trembled on the folder she held. She opened it, sliding a photo across the table. It was a still from the video. Lila's hand gripping the bucket, water frozen midair, fury on her face. This, Emily said softly, is who you are when you think no one's watching. The board members stared, whispering among themselves. Lila's facade cracked. Victor ran a hand through his hair, exhaling heavily. Enough. Both of you will deal with this quietly. Quietly? Emily's voice rose. Victor, you can't bury everything under your money. Not this time. He stood, his chair scraping against the floor. You think this helps anyone? You're embarrassing yourself. No, Emily said, her voice trembling with fire. You're the one embarrassing your family. For the first time, Maggie's eyes softened. She stepped closer to Victor. Son, she began, then stopped herself. Victor turned to her sharply. What did you call me? Maggie hesitated, but Emily saw the truth flash across her face. Victor's expression shifted. Confusion, disbelief, then something like fear. Who are you? He demanded quietly. Maggie looked down at the floor, her hands trembling just slightly. Someone who should have told you sooner. Lila slammed her hands on the table. This is insane. Are we really entertaining this woman's drama? But no one was listening to her anymore. Every pair of eyes in the room was on Maggie. Emily's heart pounded. She didn't know exactly what was coming, but she knew it would change everything. Maggie straightened her back, her voice low and calm. You'll know soon enough, Victor. But before that, remember this. Truth always demands a witness. She turned and walked out, leaving the room in stunned silence. And in that silence, a storm far greater than scandal was about to break loose. The afternoon light on Park Avenue turned golden, reflecting off the skyscraper windows like fire. The meeting had ended in chaos, board members whispering as they filed out. Emily stayed behind, staring at the photo still lying on the table, the image of Lila's cruelty frozen forever in digital truth. Victor paced by the window, his phone buzzing non-stop with unread messages. Lila sat rigid in her chair, her hands clasped tightly, her mask cracking inch by inch. I can't believe this, Victor muttered. You had no right to show that video, Emily. Do you realize what this could do to my company? Emily turned slowly, her eyes calm but sharp. Your company? You mean your reputation. The company will survive. But your conscience. She stopped, her voice trembling. That's what's dying. Lila laughed bitterly. Oh, please, don't act like you're the saint of morality. You think exposing me will make you the hero? Emily ignored her. She walked toward Victor. You're still protecting her. Even now. Why? Victor rubbed his temples. I'm not protecting her. I'm protecting what I've built. Maggie's voice suddenly echoed from the doorway. And what about who built you? Everyone turned. She stood there, composed, wearing a simple wool coat, her silver hair pinned back neatly. For the first time, her presence filled the room with something larger than silence, authority. Victor's expression hardened. You again? What are you doing here? Maggie stepped closer. Telling the truth. Lila rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go. Another moral lecture from the help. Maggie looked at her, not angry, just deeply disappointed. You really should learn when to stop talking, young lady. Daniel Brooks entered quietly, carrying a small black envelope. He handed it to Victor. Sir, you should see this. Victor opened it. Inside were official documents, copies of birth certificates, property transfers, and a faded photograph of a young woman holding a baby in front of a small Ohio farmhouse. The name on the document, Margaret Hayes. Victor froze. His hand shook slightly. This can't be real. Maggie looked straight into his eyes. It's real, Victor. I'm your mother. The room went utterly still. Emily gasped, covering her mouth. Lila's jaw dropped. What? Maggie continued softly. I left because I wanted to see who you'd become. I wanted to know if the boy I raised still had the heart I taught him to have. So I came back as someone invisible, a cleaning lady. I didn't want your money. I wanted to see your soul. Victor took a step back, his voice cracking. You lied to me. You pretended. I had to, she interrupted gently. You were surrounded by people who only told you what you wanted to hear. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. Emily's tears spilled. You knew all along? Maggie nodded. From the moment I saw you defend me, I knew my son married a woman with a kind heart. You saw me when no one else did. Victor's face twisted, a mix of shame and disbelief. He sank into a chair, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. I didn't see it. Lila stumbled to her feet, panic flashing in her eyes. Wait, she's your... Oh my God. She backed toward the door. Victor, I didn't know. If I'd known she was your mother. Victor snapped, his voice sharp as glass. You shouldn't have needed to know to treat her like a human being. Lila froze. The last bit of arrogance drained from her. Victor, please. He stood up, towering over her. Get out. She hesitated, trembling. You can't just... I said get out. Lila turned and fled, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. Maggie walked over to her son. It's not too late, Victor, but you must choose who you want to be. Emily moved closer, her hand hovering near his shoulder. She's right, she whispered, but I can't make that choice for you. Victor looked between them, the mother who tested him and the wife who still loved him despite everything. His throat tightened. Outside the windows, Manhattan lights began to glow, each one a reminder that truth always burns brighter than lies. And in that light, Victor realized that redemption would cost him everything he thought he wanted. 2 days after the revelation, the Hayes family name was still trembling on the edge of scandal. Word had begun to leak. Whispers in the boardroom, gossip among investors, speculation online. The CEO's lover assaults a housekeeper, read one anonymous blog headline. It was only a matter of time before the tabloids discovered who the housekeeper really was. Victor hadn't spoken much since that day. He worked from his study, silent, pale, avoiding eye contact even with his wife. Emily watched him from a distance, torn between heartbreak and pity. He looked like a man standing in the ruins of everything he'd built. That morning, a thick cream-colored envelope arrived, embossed with gold lettering, the Plaza Hotel Annual Charity Gala. Inside was an invitation bearing the Hayes Foundation logo, the very event Lila had mentioned. Emily turned the card over, reading aloud the note written in Victor's handwriting. "Attend with me, please. We need to face this together." For a long time, she didn't move. The baby kicked gently inside her belly, as if reminding her of something bigger than pain: legacy, forgiveness, courage. Finally, she whispered, "Okay." That evening, the city gleamed beneath a curtain of mist. Limousines lined the entrance to the plaza, headlights glinting off the marble columns. The red carpet was crowded with cameras, reporters, and socialites wrapped in couture. It was the kind of night where reputations were made or destroyed. Emily stepped out of the black Mercedes S-Class, her hand resting on her baby bump. She wore a floor-length emerald gown, modest but radiant, her hair swept into a simple twist. The air was cold against her skin, but her spine stayed straight. Tonight, she wasn't just a wife, she was a woman standing up for her family's dignity. Victor offered his arm. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Let's just get through this," she replied. Inside the grand ballroom, the chandeliers glittered like frost. Waiters in white gloves floated through the room carrying champagne trays. At the far end, the Hayes Foundation banner shimmered beneath the spotlight. And near it, Lila Monroe. She was back, wearing a silver gown, diamonds at her throat, and a smile too bright to be sincere. She posed for the cameras as if nothing had happened, speaking with donors, laughing with reporters. Emily's breath hitched. "She's here?" Victor nodded grimly. "I didn't invite her. The board must have kept her on the list before everything went public." Maggie, standing beside Emily in a simple navy coat, whispered, "Don't fear the snake that hisses in daylight. Fear the ones that slither in silence." Emily looked at her, realizing the old woman wasn't nervous at all. She was watching, waiting. As the night went on, conversations hummed under the glow of chandeliers. Emily stayed close to Victor, smiling politely for appearances, but her pulse thudded in her ears. Lila eventually approached, her perfume preceding her. "Victor?" she purred. "You look tense. You should smile for the cameras. They love a good redemption story." Victor's expression hardened. "You shouldn't be here." She ignored him, turning to Emily. "Oh, and you came too. How sweet. Playing the perfect wife in public must be exhausting." Emily met her gaze, calm and unflinching. "Not as exhausting as pretending to be a decent person." Lila's smile flickered. "Careful, darling. People are watching." "Good," Emily said softly. "Let them." Before anyone could respond, the lights dimmed. The host walked onto the stage, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest of honor, Mr. Victor Hayes." Victor froze, then straightened his tie. He looked at Emily, then at his mother, then stepped onto the stage. The crowd applauded politely. He began his speech, his voice low but clear. "Tonight, we celebrate generosity, the ability to give without humiliation, to help without judgment." His eyes shifted toward Lila. "And to remember that no act of kindness is small, no matter who receives it." Maggie smiled faintly. Emily's heart pounded. Lila's face tightened. She crossed her arms, glaring up at the stage. Victor continued, "We've all made mistakes, but what defines us isn't the mistake, it's what we do afterward." Then he paused, his voice softening. "And sometimes the ones we overlook end up being the ones who teach us what real grace looks like." The room went still. Cameras flashed. Emily felt tears rise. But before anyone could applaud, a sharp voice broke the silence. Lila's. "Tell them who she really is, Victor. Tell them you hid your own mother as a maid." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Maggie's calm expression didn't falter. Emily turned toward the stage, her heart racing. And in that instant, the plaza became the stage for truth and judgment. The ballroom froze in a heartbeat. Lila's words cut through the music, through the glittering hum of wealth, through every fragile illusion that Victor had built. "Tell them you hid your own mother as a maid." It echoed under the chandeliers, louder than the orchestra, louder than reason. Reporters lifted their phones, cameras flashed like lightning. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The smell of perfume, champagne, and shock filled the air. Victor stood on stage, stunned. His microphone picked up the sound of his breathing. He looked down at Lila, whose smile was now poison, wrapped in diamonds. "Lila," he said slowly, "this isn't the place." "Oh, I think it's exactly the place," she said, her voice slicing through the room. "You've been lecturing everyone about generosity and kindness while your own mother scrubbed your floors. How noble of you." Gasps rippled again. People turned in their seats, whispering, phones already recording. Emily stepped forward, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. "Stop it," she said firmly. "You've done enough damage." Lila sneered. "Oh, the saintly wife speaks. Tell me, Emily, did you know your husband was letting his mother live as a servant in your home while he played the perfect philanthropist?" Emily's lips trembled, but her voice was steady. "I know she's a better woman than you'll ever be." The audience murmured. The host stood frozen, clutching the microphone like it might save him. Maggie rose slowly from her seat. Her posture was regal, calm, unbothered by the eyes watching her. She walked toward the stage, the train of her navy coat brushing the marble floor. When she reached the microphone, Victor instinctively stepped aside. She looked at the audience, faces she'd once entertained as a billionaire's wife, now seeing her as something else entirely. "Yes," she said softly, "I worked in my son's house as a maid." A hush fell. "I did it by choice," she continued, her voice firm but gentle. "I wanted to see who my son had become. I wanted to see if the man who had everything still remembered what it meant to treat others with dignity. I never told him who I was because I didn't want respect that was bought with money." Lila scoffed. "Oh, please, you're just trying to clean up this circus." Maggie turned to her, her eyes sharp as glass. "My dear, I don't need to clean anything. Dirt reveals itself." A nervous laugh rolled through the crowd, the kind that hides discomfort. Victor stepped back to the microphone, his voice breaking. "She's right. Everything she said is true, and I'm ashamed of it." He turned toward his mother. "Mom, I failed you." Maggie's eyes softened. "You failed yourself, Victor, but now you can fix it." Lila rolled her eyes, desperate to regain control. "So what? We're all supposed to clap now? The billionaire's redemption arc?" She turned toward the crowd. "Don't fall for it. He's just saving face." Emily took a step forward, her voice clear. "You talk about saving face, but you've already lost your soul." Lila spun around, furious. "What did you just say?" Emily didn't back down. "I said you're a coward. You humiliated an old woman to feel powerful. Now you're doing it again because you can't stand being invisible." The ballroom went dead quiet. Every eye was on them. Lila's hand twitched like she might slap her, but Daniel Brooks appeared from the side of the stage, his tone calm but commanding. "That's enough, Miss Monroe." Security began to move toward her. Lila laughed bitterly. "You think this is over? You think people forget humiliation? They don't. They record it." She held up her iPhone, waving it like a weapon. "And I just gave the world a show it'll never forget." But before she could say another word, Jordan Price, the family's lawyer, appeared beside the stage, holding up a folder. "Actually, Miss Monroe, you just incriminated yourself." He opened the folder, revealing a printed copy of her signed non-disclosure agreement and several screenshots. "You violated multiple clauses. You'll be facing legal consequences for every false statement you make tonight." Lila's face went pale. "You can't." "Oh, we can," Jordan said evenly. "And we will." The cameras caught every second. Lila's face twisting, her fake poise collapsing. Victor turned back to the microphone, his voice breaking but clear. "This isn't about money or pride. It's about respect. And tonight, I finally remember who taught me what that means." He turned toward his mother and bowed his head. "I'm sorry, Mom." The crowd erupted in applause. Reporters shouted questions, but no one cared anymore. Emily's tears spilled freely. Maggie reached for her son's hand, and for the first time in years, they stood as a family, not perfect, but real. And as the applause rose under the chandeliers, Lila Monroe's empire of deceit finally fell silent. Snow fell softly over Manhattan the night after the gala, blanketing the chaos of the city in fragile peace. The headlines had already exploded across every news site. Billionaire CEO publicly apologizes to his mother. Victor Hayes exposes Mistress during charity gala. A real Thanksgiving miracle. But inside the Hayes penthouse, it was quiet. The same home that once echoed with cold formality now smelled of cinnamon, hot chocolate, and new beginnings. Emily stood near the window, her hands resting on her belly, watching the city glow beneath the snow. Victor entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "You should be resting," he said softly. She turned, her tone even. "I'm fine. I've had worse nights." He nodded, placing the mugs down. His eyes were tired but honest for once. "I know there aren't words big enough for everything I've done wrong," he began, "but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." Emily looked at him for a long time. "Words don't fix what action destroyed, Victor." "I know," he said. "That's why I started today. I reinstated every staff member Lila fired. I signed over half my company shares to the charity fund Mom created, and I asked the board to name her the honorary chairwoman." Emily blinked. "You did that?" He nodded. "It's the least I could do." Behind them, soft footsteps approached. Margaret, Maggie, entered the room wearing a cream shawl, her silver hair glowing in the firelight. She smiled gently at her son and daughter-in-law. "I didn't expect to see peace in this house again so soon," she said. Victor walked to her, hesitant. "Mom," he whispered, "can you ever forgive me?" She studied him, eyes full of years of love and pain. "Forgiveness isn't a gift, Victor. It's a choice. And tonight, I choose it." Victor's shoulders dropped. He pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in decades he hugged her without pride, without walls. Emily turned away for a moment, tears shining in her eyes. Margaret looked toward her and smiled. "You saved me that night, Emily. You saved my dignity and my son's soul." Emily shook her head. "I just did what anyone should have done." "No," Margaret said softly. "You did what only a brave heart does." The clock struck 9. Outside, the snow thickened, covering the city like forgiveness itself. Victor moved closer to Emily. "I meant it when I said I want to start over," he said. "I don't want money or titles to define me anymore. I just want to be a father and a husband who deserves you." Emily's breath caught. She wanted to believe him. For weeks she had lived with heartbreak, anger, and exhaustion. But now, seeing him stripped of arrogance, she saw something rare: humility. She placed her hand on his chest. "Then prove it, Victor. Every day. Not just for me, but for our child." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I will." Margaret smiled knowingly and turned toward the decorated tree in the corner. "We've all been given a second chance," she said. "Let's not waste it." The 3 of them gathered around the tree. Beneath it lay a small box with a handwritten tag. "For the woman who reminded me what strength looks like." Emily opened it and found a simple silver necklace with a tiny heart pin, modest, nothing like the jewels Lila once flaunted. She smiled. "It's beautiful." "It's honest," Victor said. "Just like you." Margaret placed her hand over Emily's. "Your child will be born into truth, not lies. That's the greatest inheritance of all." For a while they just stood there, letting the fire warm the silence. The wounds hadn't vanished. They still ached, but for the first time, they didn't feel fatal. Outside, the bells of St. Patrick's Cathedral chimed faintly through the snow. Emily turned to Victor, her voice soft. "Let's make sure our son grows up knowing that strength doesn't come from power. It comes from love." He nodded, pulling her gently into his arms. "And that real love," he whispered, "never hides behind lies." Margaret watched them, her heart full. The city outside sparkled with new light, a skyline reborn. And in that moment, under the falling snow, the Hayes family found what no amount of money could ever buy: redemption. A week had passed, but the storm it created still lingered. Reporters camped outside the Hayes building on Park Avenue, their cameras flashing every time Victor or Emily appeared. Every network wanted an interview. Every magazine wanted the inside story. Headlines screamed words like scandal, betrayal, redemption. Victor sat alone in his office late one evening, the lights of Manhattan glowing beyond the glass walls. His Mont Blanc pen lay idle beside a half-written resignation letter. The weight of everything he had lost, and everything he might still lose, pressed on his chest like a stone. He had built his empire on control, precision, and image. But now, for the first time, he was learning that rebuilding required surrender. The door opened quietly. Emily stepped inside, wearing a soft gray coat and her scarf loosely draped around her neck. She looked tired but calm, the kind of calm that comes from choosing strength after heartbreak. "You're still here," she said. Victor didn't look up. "I can't go home yet. There's too much to fix. Maybe that's the problem, she said gently. You're always trying to fix things instead of facing them. He finally turned to her, eyes weary. You don't understand. The board's losing confidence. The stock's down 8%. Lila's interview airs tomorrow. Emily walked closer, stopping beside his desk. Then tell the truth before she does. Victor frowned. To the media? To the world, she said. Do one thing without fear of consequence. Not for PR, not for reputation, for yourself. He looked at her, realizing she wasn't angry anymore, just sad for him. You really think anyone cares about the truth? I do, she said softly. The office was silent except for the hum of the city below. Then Victor nodded slowly. Okay, tomorrow morning I'll hold a press conference. Emily placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't do it to clear your name, Victor. Do it to show our child who you really are. He covered her hand with his. You're the only thing I still have that's real. Then hold on to that, she whispered. The next morning, the Plaza Hotel once again filled with cameras, reporters, and microphones. But this time, there were no chandeliers or champagne, just a single podium and one man ready to face his past. Victor stepped onto the stage wearing a simple black suit, no designer flash, no PR smile. Emily and Margaret watched from the front row, silent but proud. He cleared his throat, his voice steady but heavy. I've spent years chasing success, believing power could replace principle. But I learned that wealth without integrity is just another kind of poverty. Flashes exploded across the room. He continued, I hid my mother's identity out of fear. Fear that the truth make me look weak. Instead, it exposed how weak I really was. I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to take responsibility. He paused, glancing at Emily. I owe my wife and my mother everything. They reminded me that love isn't measured in money, but in courage. The audience was silent, not a single cough or whisper. And as for Lila Monroe, Victor said carefully, she will face justice. But I don't hate her, I pity her. Because a person who destroys others to feel powerful has already destroyed themselves. When he finished, there was a long, breathless silence, then applause. Real applause. After the conference, reporters tried to swarm him, but he didn't stop for cameras. He walked straight to Emily and Margaret. You did it, Emily said quietly. He smiled faintly. No, we did. They left together, stepping out into the crisp winter air. The sun was breaking through the clouds, melting the last of the snow. Margaret linked her arm through her son's. Pride built your empire, Victor, but humility will save your soul. He nodded. Then I'll start rebuilding from there. Emily smiled, her hand resting on her belly. For the first time in months, she didn't feel fear. She felt peace. And as the family walked down Park Avenue, they realized redemption wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning of their second chance. The morning after Victor's public confession, the world reacted faster than anyone could have imagined. The video of his speech went viral, millions of views within hours. Some praised his courage, others questioned his motives. But one thing was certain, Victor Hayes had changed the game. The man who once hid behind power had chosen to stand bare before the world. Emily scrolled through the headlines on her iPhone as she sipped coffee in the kitchen. CEO breaks silence. From scandal to redemption, the Hayes legacy reborn. She couldn't help but smile softly. For the first time, the news didn't make her anxious, it made her proud. Margaret joined her, her steps quiet, graceful. He did well, she said, stirring sugar into her tea. Emily nodded. He did. It's strange. I spent so long wishing he'd just see me, and now he finally sees everything. Margaret smiled. Sometimes men need to lose their world before they open their eyes. Before Emily could respond, Victor appeared in the doorway, wearing a simple wool coat instead of his usual tailored suit. He looked lighter, almost human again. Good morning, he said, his voice warm but uncertain. Emily met his eyes. How are you feeling? Free, he said simply, and terrified. Margaret chuckled softly. That means you're finally alive. Victor joined them at the table. The board called an emergency session. Some want to remove me as CEO. Emily's heart tightened. Are they allowed to? He nodded. Technically, yes, but Jordan's working on it. Whatever happens, I'll accept it. Margaret reached across the table, placing her hand over his. You can rebuild anything, Victor, except integrity. You only get one chance to keep that. He smiled faintly. I think I finally understand that. The sound of the doorbell interrupted them. Daniel Brooks, the security chief, entered holding a folder. Sorry for the early visit, he said, but you'll want to see this. Victor opened the folder. Inside were screenshots, emails, and a draft article. The headline read, Lila Monroe faces criminal charges. Emily's eyes widened. She's really being charged? Daniel nodded. Defamation, breach of contract, and obstruction. She tried to sell fake statements to a gossip network. They turned it over to our lawyers instead. Victor exhaled deeply. So it's over. Not yet, Daniel said. She's threatening to release an edited video claiming the gala confrontation was staged. We've already filed an injunction. Emily frowned. She's still fighting? Margaret's tone was calm. People like her always do, until they realize truth doesn't negotiate. Victor leaned back, looking out the window. I don't want revenge anymore, just peace. Daniel nodded. Then I'll handle the rest quietly. When he left, the room grew quiet again. Emily reached across the table, touching Victor's hand. Peace doesn't come from silence, Victor. It comes from forgiveness, even for her. He looked at her, surprised. You're asking me to forgive Lila? I'm asking you to forgive yourself, she said softly. Margaret smiled, pride shining in her eyes. She's wiser than you deserve, my son. Victor laughed quietly. A sound that felt real for the first time in months. Yeah, she is. Hours later, the three of them took a walk through Central Park. The snow had melted into patches of silver, and children ran past with red scarves fluttering behind them. Emily stopped near the frozen pond, watching her reflection ripple across the thin layer of ice. Victor slipped his arm around her shoulders. You know, he said, when I was a kid, Mom used to bring me here. She told me the city never sleeps, it only forgives. Margaret chuckled. I said that after you broke my favorite vase. Emily smiled. Guess you were right. New York forgives, eventually. Victor looked at his wife, his voice low. To you? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. I'm getting there. He kissed her forehead. Then that's enough for me. Margaret looked up at the skyline, her heart full. Maybe this was never about falling from grace. Maybe it was about finding it again. And as they stood beneath the winter sun, the Hayes family realized that truth doesn't destroy, it purifies. And from that purity, a new beginning quietly bloomed. 2 weeks later, the calm they had fought for began to tremble again. It started with a single notification, a message that arrived on Emily's iPhone at 6:03 a.m., just as the city was waking. The sender's name made her blood run cold. Lila Monroe. The message was short but sharp. You think you've won, Emily? The truth is never as clean as it looks. Watch the news. Before Emily could react, the television in the living room flickered to life. A breaking news banner rolled across the screen. Exclusive, leaked audio from Hayes family exposes hidden tensions. Her hands shook as she turned up the volume. The audio was grainy but clear. Victor's voice, angry and exhausted from months ago. You're just a charity case, Emily. You wouldn't survive without me. Her breath caught. She remembered that night, an argument during one of their worst fights, when he'd said things he didn't mean. But now, out of context, it sounded cruel, heartless. Margaret entered the room, her face pale. What happened? Emily handed her the phone. She leaked it. By the time Victor came downstairs, the news was everywhere. Social media was flooded with clips, twisted headlines painting him as a manipulative husband who had used his wife for image. The redemption arc was unraveling fast. I can fix this, Victor said, grabbing his coat. I'll make a statement. No, Emily said sharply. No more statements, no more microphones. Every word you speak now will sound like another lie. He froze, the truth in her voice cutting through the panic. Emily, you know I didn't mean those things. I know, she said softly, but they don't, and they won't. Margaret stepped closer. Son, you can't fight a viper by stepping into its nest. Let her hang herself with her own venom. Victor clenched his fists. If I stay silent, she wins. No, Margaret said. If you stay silent, you rise. But he couldn't sit still. Hours later, against advice, Victor met with Jordan, his lawyer, and Daniel, his security chief. I want everything she's done exposed, he said. Every lie, every deal, every text. Jordan hesitated. That might backfire. The public's turning emotional. If you retaliate, you'll look vengeful. Victor's patience snapped. Then what do you suggest? Let her destroy my family again? Emily, who had quietly followed him to the office, stepped inside. Her voice was calm but heavy. Let her destroy herself. He turned to her, torn between anger and admiration. You want me to just do nothing? Yes, she said, do nothing for her, do everything for us. Victor stared at her. Slowly the fight in his eyes softened. You're right, he whispered. I've been reacting to her every move like she still controls me. She doesn't, Emily said, not anymore. That evening, Lila posted a dramatic video online accusing the Hayes family of manipulation and fake forgiveness. She cried on camera, claiming she was used, abandoned, and silenced. But this time, the public didn't buy it. Within hours, Daniel leaked court documents showing her blackmail attempts and falsified evidence. Journalists compared her sob story to her earlier threats. The sympathy she'd sought turned into outrage. By midnight, her name was trending. Not as a victim, but as a fraud. Lila lies filled every feed. Her sponsors cut ties. Her lawyer resigned. The empire she'd built on seduction and deceit crumbled in a single night. Victor sat beside Emily on the couch, watching the headlines scroll by. It's over, he said quietly. Emily turned to him. No, Victor, it's finished. Over means you still think about it. Finished means it doesn't touch you anymore. He nodded slowly, his hand finding hers. Margaret watched them from across the room, her heart swelling with quiet pride. Outside, the city hummed softly beneath the snow-dusted skyline. For the first time there was no noise, no lies, no scandal, no storm, just peace. And in that stillness, they realized that sometimes victory isn't about fighting louder. It's about standing still until the truth speaks for itself. The days after Lila's downfall felt strangely quiet. The kind of quiet that came after a storm had torn through everything and left behind only the sound of healing. The media finally moved on. The paparazzi outside Hayes Tower vanished. Investors stopped calling. The noise of judgment faded into the background, replaced by something unfamiliar but comforting. Normalcy. Emily spent most of her time preparing for the baby. The nursery, once an unused guest room, now smelled of new paint and baby powder. Sunlight poured through soft white curtains. A tiny crib sat near the window, a stuffed bear resting inside. She stood there one morning, her hand on her belly, whispering, "You're coming into a cleaner world, little one." Behind her, Victor appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame, watching her with quiet admiration. "I forgot how peaceful you look when you're not worrying about me." Emily turned, half smiling. "That's because for once you're not giving me a reason to worry." He chuckled, stepping closer. "I'm trying, Em. Every day. I even started therapy." Her brows lifted slightly. "Really? Jordan gave me a name, a guy downtown. He's helping me deal with who I used to be." Emily nodded slowly. "That's a good start." Victor hesitated. "I know I can't erase everything I did, but maybe I can build something better." She looked down at the baby bump between them. "Then build it for him or her, not for me." He reached out, gently placing a hand on her stomach. The baby kicked, and his eyes lit up with something pure. "You feel that?" Emily smiled faintly. "That's your second chance." Later that day, Margaret arrived with a box of old family photos. She set it on the kitchen island, dust puffing into the warm light. "If you're going to build something new, you should remember where you came from," she said. Inside the box were faded pictures of a simpler time. Victor as a little boy covered in flour, helping his mother bake bread. A teenage Margaret at a typewriter, smiling at the camera. A farmhouse surrounded by golden fields. Victor picked up one of the photos. "I forgot what this looked like." Margaret smiled. "That's what happens when you climb too high. You stop looking down." Emily glanced through the photos, laughing softly. "You look so happy here." Margaret nodded. "Because I was. Money can decorate a house, Emily, but love is what makes it a home." That evening, the three of them sat down for dinner together for the first time in years. No chefs, no staff, no guests, just family. Emily served roasted chicken and vegetables, her favorite comfort food. Margaret lit a single candle in the center of the table. Victor raised his glass. To new beginnings. Margaret smiled knowingly. To lessons learned the hard way. Emily hesitated for a moment, then raised hers. And to peace that doesn't need proving. They clinked glasses, laughter bubbling softly through the candlelight. After dinner, Margaret went to the nursery, sitting quietly in the rocking chair by the crib. She hummed an old lullaby, the same one she used to sing to Victor. He stood by the door, listening, a lump forming in his throat. When she noticed him, she smiled. "You know, when you were a baby, you wouldn't sleep unless I held your hand. Maybe your child will be just as stubborn." He laughed quietly. I hope so. Margaret looked at him with pride and tenderness. You've come a long way, son. Don't lose yourself again. I won't, he promised. Later, when the apartment had gone quiet, Victor found Emily on the balcony overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Snowflakes drifted under the golden lights. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders. Everything feels still, he said softly. It's not still, she whispered. It's peaceful. There's a difference. He nodded, pulling her closer. Below them, the city glowed, the same city that once chewed them up and spat them out, now holding them in gentle silence. And for the first time, the Hayes family didn't feel like survivors of a scandal. They felt like a family finally finding their way home. Winter melted into early spring, and with it came the season of renewal. The air in Manhattan turned softer, the streets buzzing again with the rhythm of life. But for Victor Hayes, the hum of the city no longer sounded like a competition. It sounded like forgiveness. 3 months had passed since the scandal faded, and yet one thing remained unfinished. His public apology to those who had been caught in the storm of his mistakes. The press wanted an interview. The public wanted closure. And this time, Victor didn't want to hide behind PR statements or lawyers. He wanted to speak as a man, not a CEO. The setting was chosen carefully. A small stage at the New York Public Library. No luxury hotel, no red carpet, just rows of wooden chairs and the quiet weight of honesty. Reporters filled the room, cameras ready. Lights glowing against the tall, arched windows. Emily and Margaret sat together in the front row, their presence calm, grounding. Victor walked to the podium. Gone was the arrogance that once defined him. His hair was slightly longer, his face unshaven, his suit simple and dark. He cleared his throat and began. 3 months ago, he said, his voice steady, I thought reputation was everything. I believed that as long as the world respected my success, I could outrun my failures. But the truth is, I wasn't leading, I was performing. And when the performance ended, all I had left was shame. The room was silent, except for the faint buzz of camera shutters. I hurt people who trusted me, he continued. I ignored the wisdom of my mother, the love of my wife, and the values I claimed to stand for. I let pride build a wall between who I was and who I should have been. And when that wall fell, it crushed more than my career. It crushed the people I love. Emily felt tears prick her eyes. Margaret held her hand quietly. Victor took a deep breath. I'm not here to rebuild my image. I'm here to rebuild my integrity. So today I'm officially resigning as CEO of Hayes Capital. My mother, Margaret Hayes, will serve as honorary chairwoman of the Hayes Foundation, and my wife, Emily Carter Hayes, will oversee our new initiative for employee welfare and maternal health. It's time this company remembers its humanity. The reporters buzzed, stunned. Victor smiled faintly. For years I built towers of glass and steel, but the most important foundation I ever needed was the one at home. He paused, looking at Emily. You stood by me when I didn't deserve it. You defended my mother when I was too blind to see her. You saved my family's name, not with money, but with courage. And I will spend the rest of my life honoring that. A few reporters lowered their cameras. Even the cynical ones couldn't deny the raw sincerity in his tone. I don't expect forgiveness, Victor said, his voice softening, but I hope that by telling the truth, I can at least leave something honest behind. He stepped back from the podium. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, the audience began to clap. Not the thunderous applause of spectacle, but the quiet, respectful sound of people witnessing redemption. After the event, Emily joined him outside the library steps. The late afternoon light brushed against the stone columns, painting the city gold. You did it, she said softly. Victor exhaled. I don't know if I did. You did, she repeated. You didn't defend yourself. You told the truth. That's all that ever mattered. Margaret joined them, her smile proud and gentle. Your father would have been proud too, she said. Victor looked up at the sky, blinking away the emotion in his eyes. I hope so. They stood there for a while, watching the city pulse with life. A breeze swept through, carrying with it the distant sounds of laughter, traffic, and the soft ringing of church bells. Emily slipped her hand into his. Let's go home, she whispered. He nodded, his voice quiet but certain. Home, he repeated. And as they walked down the steps together, hand in hand, the man once defined by his power finally learned what real strength felt like. Humility. The evening after Victor's resignation, Manhattan seemed unusually calm. The city's chaos muffled by early spring rain. Inside the Hayes penthouse, the fireplace crackled softly, a warm contrast to the storm outside. Emily sat on the couch, her laptop open, reviewing plans for the new foundation Victor had promised to launch. Programs for single mothers, scholarships for low-income families, and shelters for elderly workers. It was the kind of work that gave her peace. For once, their life had meaning beyond survival. Victor entered, rolling up his sleeves, raindrops clinging to his hair. He smiled faintly. "You're still working?" She looked up, smiling back. "Someone has to keep your promises." He laughed softly. "Fair." He sat beside her, leaning in to read the proposal. "You're doing something good here, Em." "We are," she corrected. "Together." They shared a quiet moment, broken only by the tapping of rain on the glass. Then the doorbell rang. Daniel Brooks appeared in the entryway, his expression grave. "Sir, we have a problem." Victor frowned. "What now?" Daniel stepped forward, placing a sealed envelope on the table. "This was delivered an hour ago to the security desk. No return address." Emily's stomach tightened. "From who?" Daniel hesitated. "We think from Lila Monroe." Victor froze. "I thought she left New York." "She did," Daniel said. "But before leaving she recorded something. A video. It's been leaked online." Emily's heart sank. "What kind of video?" Daniel sighed. "One where she claims your apology was a setup. She's calling it a corporate performance. She says you used your mother and your wife to manipulate sympathy." Victor clenched his jaw. "Of course she did." "She's saying the foundation is fake," Daniel continued. "That it's a cover to win back investors. The clip already has 2 million views." Emily stared at the screen, disbelief turning into exhaustion. "She won't stop until she destroys every good thing we try to build." Victor paced the room. "No, I won't let her." "Victor," Emily said softly, "don't give her that power again." He stopped, turning to her. "You want me to do nothing while she calls you a liar? Calls my mother a prop?" "I want you to stay human," she said. "That's what she's trying to take away. Don't let her pull you back into the man you used to be." He stood there, breathing hard. Then, slowly, his anger began to fade. Daniel spoke quietly. "We can handle this. I already contacted Jordan. We'll release the financial records of the foundation to prove transparency. If she wants to play dirty, we'll drown her with truth." Emily nodded. "That's how we fight now. Not with rage, but with proof." Victor ran a hand through his hair. "Do it." When Daniel left, Emily turned to Victor. "You know what's sad? She's not even angry anymore. She's desperate. People like her don't know how to live without chaos." He sat beside her again, the exhaustion heavy in his eyes. "She'll fade, Em. People forget scandals faster than they forget kindness." Emily smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what redemption really is, outlasting the noise." He reached for her hand. "You're my peace, you know that?" Her eyes softened. "Then protect it." Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Victor checked his phone one last time. News alerts buzzed. Lila Monroe under investigation for fraud. Her attempt to smear them had backfired. The network she sent her video to had uncovered her own financial crimes. Victor showed Emily the headline. She sighed with relief. "It's finally over." He turned off the phone, pulling her close. "No," he whispered. "It's just finally quiet." Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. The city lights blurred like distant memories through the window. Margaret's voice echoed faintly from the hallway, humming the same lullaby she used to sing years ago. Emily rested her head on Victor's shoulder. "You know," she murmured, "sometimes peace feels louder than war." He smiled. "Then let's live quietly." And as thunder rolled away into the distance, the last shadow of their past disappeared, leaving only love, forgiveness, and the fragile sound of a life finally whole. Spring in New York carried a softness that almost felt like mercy. The city that had once swallowed them whole now seemed to hold them gently, as if acknowledging all they had survived. The Hayes penthouse, once cold and echoing with unspoken anger, now pulsed with quiet life. The hum of a coffee machine, the laughter of Margaret tending to her plants, and the rhythmic tick of the clock counting down to Emily's due date. Victor was already awake that morning, sitting by the window with a cup of black coffee and the newspaper folded neatly beside him. The headline was simple. Hayes Foundation expands outreach to 50 states. He smiled to himself. For the first time in years, he wasn't on the front page because of scandal, but because of purpose. Emily walked in, her steps slow, graceful, one hand resting protectively on her belly. She wore a pale blue dress that brushed her ankles, her glow unmistakable. "You're up early," she said softly. He turned, smiling. "Couldn't sleep. The baby kicks harder at dawn. I think he's trying to start his own board meeting in there." She laughed lightly, her eyes shining. "He gets that from you." Victor set down his cup and stood walking toward her. "From us?" he corrected. "He gets his heart from you." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. The quiet between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, complete. Down the hallway, Margaret's voice floated through the air. "Don't forget your prenatal appointment at 11, she called out, her tone as commanding as ever. Emily chuckled. "She still thinks I'll forget something." Victor smiled. "That's because she's been waiting years to mother someone again." Later that morning, as they prepared to leave for the hospital, a small box arrived at the door. No return address. Inside was a simple white envelope and a folded letter in handwriting neither of them recognized. Emily hesitated before opening it. The note read, "Dear Emily, I've left the city for good. I won't bother you or your family again. You were right. I didn't know how to live without chaos. But I'm trying to learn. Take care of your child. Don't let them grow up angry at the world like I did." Lila. Emily stood silently for a moment, the letter trembling in her hands. Victor frowned. "She's still out there?" "She's gone," Emily said softly. "That's enough." She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Maybe even she deserves to start over somewhere else. He didn't argue. For the first time, the name Lila no longer sparked rage, only closure. The day drifted by gently. At the hospital, Dr. Grace Nguyen greeted them with her usual calm warmth. "Everything looks perfect," she said, smiling at the ultrasound screen. "Strong heartbeat, steady growth. You're almost there." Emily's eyes shimmered with tears. Victor held her hand, watching the tiny flicker of life on the monitor. "He's real," he whispered, awe in his voice. "He always was," she said. That night, they returned home to find Margaret cooking dinner. The smell of roasted herbs and fresh bread filled the apartment. She smiled as they entered. "Well?" Victor grinned. "He's healthy and stubborn." Margaret laughed, relief softening her face. "Good. Maybe that stubbornness will keep him brave." They ate together, the laughter light and easy. The tension that once poisoned their table had vanished completely, replaced by warmth, gratitude, and love. After dinner, Victor stepped onto the balcony, watching the sunset wash Manhattan in gold. Emily joined him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "You ever think about what life could have been if none of that happened?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "All the time. But then I remember, without the chaos, I might never have learned what peace feels like." She smiled. "You finally sound like a man who's at peace." He slipped his arm around her waist. "That's because I finally am." Behind them, Margaret's voice drifted from the living room, humming that same lullaby. The sound wrapped around them like a memory, like forgiveness turned into music. And as the city lights blinked to life, Victor and Emily realized that peace wasn't something you found at the end of the storm. It was something you built after surviving it. By late spring, the Hayes family had finally settled into a rhythm that felt ordinary. And for them, ordinary was the sweetest kind of miracle. The world had moved on from headlines and hashtags. The noise had died down. What remained was a quiet, humble peace that filled every corner of their home. Emily's belly had grown round and full, and the baby's kicks came stronger each night. Victor often stayed awake just to feel them, his hand resting over her stomach like he was guarding something sacred. The man who once measured success in dollars now measured it in heartbeats. One bright May morning, the city woke under soft sunlight, Central Park blooming with lilacs and tulips. Emily sat by the window, sipping tea, the aroma of jasmine filling the room. Margaret joined her, knitting tiny socks with the concentration of someone building a legacy. "You know," Margaret said, glancing up from her work, "your child's going to be spoiled with love. Maybe even too much." Emily smiled. "After everything we went through, I think a little too much love is exactly what we need." Margaret chuckled. "You sound like me when Victor was born." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," Emily replied warmly. The doorbell rang. Victor appeared moments later, holding a small bouquet of lilies. "For the two strongest women I know," he said, setting them on the table. "And before you ask, No, there's no press conference, no meetings, no crises, just us today. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Miracles do happen. They all laughed. The laughter felt easy now, free from the weight of what used to hang over them. After lunch, Victor handed Emily an envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, not printed or typed. His handwriting, slightly uneven, honest. She began to read aloud. Emily, I spent years building walls and calling them towers. I thought strength meant silence, and success meant never apologizing. But you taught me that strength is gentleness, and that forgiveness is the highest form of courage. I don't deserve the peace you've given me, but I promise I'll earn it. Not with words, but with the kind of life our child will be proud of. Thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on myself. Her eyes filled with tears. Victor, he smiled softly, it's not a speech, it's just the truth. She set the letter down, taking his hand. Then let me tell you my truth. He nodded. When I married you, she began, I didn't marry the billionaire or the CEO. I married the man who laughed when I spilled coffee on his suit, who stayed up until 3 a.m. helping me fix a leaky faucet. Somewhere along the way, you lost him. But I never stopped believing he was still in there. And now, he's back. Victor swallowed hard, emotion rising in his throat. He never deserved you. No, she said gently. But he needs me, and that's enough. Margaret smiled from across the room, her eyes glistening with quiet pride. You two finally sound like a team again. Victor looked at her. We are, Mom, thanks to you. She shook her head. Thanks to truth, it hurts, but it heals. That evening, they took a walk through Central Park. The air was warm, the skyline glowing gold behind the trees. Families picnicked, children ran through the grass, and somewhere nearby, a street musician played a soft melody on his saxophone. Emily stopped near the lake, looking out over the calm water. It's strange, she said. The same city that once broke us now feels like home again. Victor wrapped his arm around her. Because this time, we're not pretending. They stood there for a long time, watching the light fade over the water. Margaret joined them, holding their hands in hers. You know what forgiveness really is? She asked softly. It's when love gets another chance. Victor nodded. Then we've been given a miracle. Emily smiled, tears shining in her eyes. No, she whispered. We became one. And as dusk fell over Central Park, the Hayes family finally understood that forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about rewriting the future together. By June, New York shimmered under early summer heat, the air thick with the scent of street food, flowers, and life. The world had long stopped watching the Hayes family. But inside their Manhattan penthouse, something much more important was unfolding. Emily's due date was only days away. The nursery was ready. Soft white walls, a rocking chair by the window, and a mobile of tiny silver stars gently swaying above the crib. Every detail was perfect, every corner a quiet symbol of hope. Margaret had spent the morning folding baby clothes, humming that old lullaby again. Victor had been pacing for hours, pretending to check things, though everyone knew he was nervous. Relax, Emily said, sitting on the couch, one hand on her stomach. You're more anxious than I am. He stopped pacing, grinning nervously. I can't help it. I've signed billion-dollar deals with less pressure than this. Margaret chuckled. That's because this one lasts forever, son. He smiled. Yeah, I know. A knock sounded at the door. Daniel Brooks stepped in, holding a manila envelope. Sorry to interrupt, but this just came from the legal office. Victor frowned. What is it? Daniel handed it over. The final paperwork for the foundation's expansion and a letter from one of the shelters you funded in Chicago. They wanted you to see it personally. Victor opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from a woman named Sarah Cole. Mr. Hayes, I was one of your company's janitors before I lost my job last year. I thought my life was over. Then your foundation helped me get back on my feet. I have a home again. My daughter is back in school. Thank you for remembering people like me. Victor's voice broke as he read it aloud. He looked up at Emily, emotion swelling in his eyes. That's the first time someone's ever thanked me for something real. Emily smiled softly. That's because this time, you gave from your heart. Margaret touched his arm. You see, Victor? That's the legacy worth leaving behind. Not the towers, not the headlines, but the lives that keep standing because of you. He nodded slowly, folding the letter carefully and placing it on the mantel. I'll frame it, he said quietly, right next to the wedding photo. That night, the sky outside turned a deep shade of indigo. Manhattan's skyline twinkled like a field of stars. Emily sat by the window, rubbing her belly, lost in thought. Victor joined her, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. Doctor's orders said no caffeine, he teased. She smiled, taking the cup. You remembered. I remember everything now, he said, sitting beside her. Every mistake, every second chance. I don't want to forget any of it, because that's how I'll stay grateful. She rested her head on his shoulder. You've changed, Victor. I had to, he whispered, because you stayed. Just then, a small jolt ran through her. Her hand shot to her belly. He froze. Was that? Her breath hitched. I think it's time. He stood so quickly he nearly spilled the cocoa. Okay. Hospital bag, car keys, call Dr. Grace. Margaret came running from the hallway. Already in the car, she said, grabbing the hospital file. Let's go. Minutes later, the black Mercedes sped through quiet streets toward Mount Sinai Hospital, city lights reflecting off the windshield like moving stars. Emily breathed steadily, clutching Victor's hand. You're doing great, he whispered, panic in his voice despite the calm words. She laughed through the pain. You look like you're the one about to give birth. Margaret turned from the passenger seat, smiling. Somehow, he is, to a better version of himself. Victor squeezed Emily's hand, his eyes wet. You're my everything, Em. You and this baby, you saved me. She smiled faintly, tears shining in her eyes. Then let's bring our miracle into the world. As they neared the hospital, the city stretched out behind them, the skyline of their past glowing quietly under the moonlight. And for the first time, Victor Hayes didn't see Manhattan as a battlefield of ambition. He saw it as the place where love finally won. The city never really slept, but that night the world outside Mount Sinai Hospital felt different. Gentler, quieter, as if New York itself was holding its breath. In the maternity ward, the sterile white walls glowed under soft light. Emily lay on the hospital bed, her hands gripping Victor's as nurses moved swiftly around her. Her face was pale but calm, her eyes filled with both exhaustion and an unbreakable fire. Victor's heart pounded louder than the machine's. You're doing amazing, Em, he whispered, brushing the sweat from her forehead. She smiled faintly. Don't faint on me, Mr. Hayes. I need you standing. He chuckled, but his voice cracked with emotion. I'm not going anywhere. Margaret stood near the window, her hands clasped tightly in prayer, tears glistening in her eyes. Dr. Grayson Wynne, calm and confident, looked up from her station. We're almost there. Emily, one more push. Time seemed to stretch, seconds becoming eternity. Then, a cry. High, sharp, perfect. The sound filled the room like light breaking through darkness. Victor froze, eyes wide, as the nurse lifted a small, wrinkled, beautiful miracle into the air. It's a boy, Dr. Grace said softly, smiling. Emily gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. Victor stood frozen, breath caught in his throat. He's ours? He whispered, as if afraid the moment might vanish. The nurse placed the baby in Emily's arms, his tiny fingers curled instinctively around her thumb. Emily looked down at him, awe and love flooding her face. Hey there, she whispered. Welcome home, little one. Victor leaned closer, tears streaming freely now. He's perfect, he said, just like his mom. Emily laughed weakly. You helped too, you know. Margaret approached, trembling as she reached out to touch the baby's soft cheek. My grandson, she whispered, her voice breaking. My second chance. Dr. Grace smiled gently. Congratulations, everyone. You 3 have earned this peace. She slipped out quietly, leaving the family bathed in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't hurt but heals. Victor sank into the chair beside the bed, his hand resting on Emily's arm. We should name him, he said softly. Emily looked down at the baby, who was already drifting to sleep. You choose. Victor hesitated, emotion choking him. How about Nathaniel James Hayes? Nathaniel means gift from God. Emily smiled, nodding. It fits, because that's exactly what he is. Margaret wiped her eyes. Nathaniel, my little Nate. She smiled through her tears. He's going to grow up knowing the kind of love this family forgot for too long, but finally found again. As the hours passed, dawn began to paint the sky outside the window. The first light of morning touched the skyline, spilling golden hues across the city. The room glowed softly, as if heaven itself had decided to visit. Victor held his son for the first time, his hands trembling slightly. Nate's tiny body fit perfectly against his chest. I used to think legacy meant money, he said quietly. But this is legacy. Emily smiled, watching him. He's going to be the best part of us. Margaret sat down beside them, and he'll know his family's story, not the one the papers told, but the truth. That his father fell, his mother forgave, and they built something stronger than pride. Victor looked up, his eyes full of gratitude. You're the reason we made it, Mom. Margaret shook her head. No, son. Love is the reason. Outside, church bells began to ring faintly through the morning air, echoing across the city. The sound mingled with the newborn's soft breathing, the rhythm of a world renewed. Emily closed her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. Do you hear that? Victor nodded. It's the sound of peace. Margaret smiled. It's the sound of beginnings. He looked down at his son again, the city stretching endlessly beyond the glass. Welcome to the world, Nate, he whispered. We'll make it better for you. And as sunlight poured into the room, touching every face with warmth, the Hayes family finally understood that the greatest fortune they would ever own was not their empire, but each other. So that's it, my friends. Our story has come full circle. If you're still here right now, watching until this very moment, then something in this story must have touched your heart, even just a little. And maybe that's the whole point. Life breaks us in ways we never expect, but it also gives us the chance to rebuild, softer, wiser, and kinder than before. You see, Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." The storms, the betrayals, the heartbreaks, they aren't just obstacles, they're invitations to grow. Like Victor and Emily, we all fall. But healing begins the moment we choose love over pride, forgiveness over revenge, and truth over appearances. If this story reminded you of something real, your family, your pain, or your own quiet comeback, then let that feeling stay with you. Share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel so we can keep walking this journey of healing together. Because maybe, just maybe, the end of one story is the beginning of yours.